Kia ora everybody, and welcome to Surviving and Thriving in the New World Insurance Style. My name is Mike Lovegrove. I'm the CEO and founder at JRNY, and I'm joined by Matt Ralph, who is the Customer Success Director at Montoux for New Zealand and Australia, where he was previously the head of pricing at A&P Life Insurance in Australia. Welcome, Matt.
Hi. Hello, how are you?
Very well. Hey, thanks for joining today. We're both working in the insurtech sector. We're both working with large insurers and helping them to navigate the waters of the new world.
Yes.
So I'm really keen to understand and hear about what you're hearing and what you're seeing from insurers in the COVID-19 world.
There was a period of time now where the only thing that the insurers I was talking to was worrying about was how they were going to just manage the business, how they were actually going to operate in the short term in a world of sort of working from home and so forth. And I think it's easy for us to forget how hard that can be for some of those big organizations. Probably the most interesting example I saw was an insurer where a lot of the financial accounting stuff had been offshore to India actually, and the guys that were doing that work in India were locked down at home, and none of them had ability to work from home. So suddenly, overnight, they've lost a large chunk of their accounting teams. Now, companies are starting to move into this more kind of, well, what's the immediate impact of this, and what are our priorities in the immediate term to just keep things moving along? And I think what I'm seeing is there's been a lot of M&A work going on in Australia, and I think that has that's still a high priority for a lot of organisations. And so what they're doing is putting all the resources, because it's inevitable that kind of is top of it. So they're putting all the resources into sort of meeting those high priority projects that they had running. And what that has meant is that in some cases, and then some insurtechs might be seeing this, that other projects that are sort of less mandatory, as it were, are starting to sort of drop off the radar a little bit at the moment. So that's having an impact. Sort of, if there was a retooling program going on, for example, that may sort of drop off a bit. But hopefully, when this phase is over, we'll move into a more kind of strategic phase where the COVID-19 impacts cause insurers to really have a good think about strategically where do they need to be, what are their options, transactional, structural, operational options to really sort of deal with the new world, which is going to have additional pressures on insurers. And that's what I'm thinking is going to be the time when potentially digital solutions, for example, that have sort of been bubbling along in the background for ages, but never really getting the focus they needed, start to sort of really ramp up the importance. So if you think about something like face-to-face financial advice, for example, that has long been seen as being a challenging way of doing business, a very expensive way of doing business. I think that the focus on looking for alternatives to face-to-face advice will really ramp up, and obviously digital solutions to that are going to be key.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with all of that. I mean, from our point of view, we've kind of seen, or we've kind of split up what we're seeing into three categories. Is like in the short term, what are insurers doing? And typically what we've seen is that they're just trying to put out the fires, like make sure they're still operating. You're talking about the accounting that's being outsourced, and there's like, how do we just solve that really quickly right here, right now? We've seen some of that from a call center perspective, where a call center may not have been able to operate remotely as well, and then there's a whole bunch of urgency around how do we take the call center from being I guess people operated to something that's maybe a digital solution, or not necessarily the full solution right here, but just like, can we just solve the problem really quickly in the next 2 weeks, for example?
But that's right. And so you've got to solve the problem today, but then you've got to be, how does that work going forwards?
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of in the medium term. It's okay. Now that's that strategic piece that you speak of, and as insurers, insurers should be looking at, okay, so even if we're making a change to the short term right here, right now, can we incorporate that in some way in that medium-term strategic piece that we know we're going to have to tackle, because the new world is going to be radically different to what we know. Like you're saying, face-to-face interactions, it's one, at the moment, it's not even possible, and two, it's a really costly exercise to sell an insurance product, for example. There's probably a better way, and that's probably using innovation and digital.
Yeah. I mean, office space has been an expensive overhead, obviously, for a long time. And I think one of the things that's happened in the last few weeks is that companies are starting to realise that maybe there are other ways of doing things. I don't think that's going to be everyone's going to work from home indefinitely, but a more efficient use of office space will be a huge benefit to companies. And there are some digital solutions that they need to put in place to make that work. So, I mean, even if you look at life insurance, for example, managing a claim for a life insurer is still got a lot of paperwork, like hard copy paperwork that goes into it. So solving that kind of problem to put it fully online, fully digital, will be a huge benefit, because you can then start to manage claims outside of the office.
Yeah, and the efficiencies that can be gained, and the customer experience, the customer suddenly is experiencing something in real time. They're going to have a great experience with that said insurer. So there's there's so much, it's almost like this is the flame, or this is the fire, which is causing these insurers to make changes, and these changes probably still should have been made.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So that actually leads quite nicely into this next question that I have for you, Matt, is like how innovation and digitisation will help insurers thrive through these changing times.
Yeah, so I think I probably alluded to it a little bit then. I think there are some very basic processes that, there's been a degree of digitisation for sure, but they haven't quite got all the way there yet. So another one would be the underwriting process for a life insurer, which is the process when the insurer takes a look at a potential customer and assesses their health background before making a decision about on what terms they'll insure them. A good degree of that is done fully automated now through sort of decision engines. But there's a reasonable chunk of customers that take up a large chunk of time where that is still a fairly sort of manual process. It involves getting handwritten notes or hard copies of notes and so on. And it can be there is a lot more that could be done in that, as an example of where once you've got that fully digitized, you have these opportunities to manage your business a lot differently. I suppose the other one is the platforms that a lot of these business are being managed on. Sort of mainframe type systems that don't, you can access them off away from the office, but they're kind of clunky, and I think the opportunities there are probably quite large as well. And the benefits aren't always clear to insurers of doing some of these things. They only become apparent once they start to move down this pathway. So I've certainly seen cases where an insurer's replaced elements of their platform with something a lot more modern, probably sort of 30 years or 40 years more modern than what they had in place, and actually the flexibility that's given them to manage through this COVID-19 period, and to be more flexible about the timing of certain events and so on, because maintenance and upgrades are easier to manage, has been, was probably not as, they probably hadn't anticipated the benefits that they were going to achieve. So I think it's becoming clearer now that it's not always easy to see exactly what the benefits will be, but they are tangible when they arrive.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that we've seen a lot of organizations that might have put off digitizing some element, or maybe they're putting off going to the cloud, and now they're really struggling. Whereas some of those other organizations, some of those other insurers that did take the plunge early on, when, like you say, they weren't too sure of the true ROI, they're seeing it now through their BCP processes, where their team can actually work in a distributed environment. And
it's all about flexibility. It's all about having that flexibility to manage the unknown. So hopefully there won't be another COVID-19 around the corner, but who knows what is around the corner and what will need to be managed.
I mean, even just one I think relevant case is when, say, a particular insurer may outsource a particular function of their business, and they're like, okay, from a BCP perspective, let's just make sure let's call it these accounting firms, or the accounting teams are one's in India, maybe one's in Australia, one's in New Zealand. It's like, okay, cool. So there's our BCP there. But then that doesn't a global pandemic, that doesn't survive the global pandemic.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there is a need to still have like it's like a digital BCP strategy in place,
yep,
and to have that backing up
yep.
your fundamental business.
I saw actually a very similar example. This was going back a few years now when we had a flooding catastrophe in Australia, and an insurer had put in place what they thought was a pretty robust call center structure, where they had alternate call centers in different locations, so that if one was put out of action by whatever natural disaster it might be, the other one would be able to pick up the slack. And in fact, both got hit by the same issue at the same time, and they actually really struggled. And so you could see how a virtual call center would have dealt much more well with that problem.
Big time. And then
yeah.
I guess from an insurer, they're like, hey, that's great to know, Matt. Like if the insurers are watching this, it's like, how do they actually move to that structure? Well, I think you kind of answered it when you were talking before. The first thing is, if they can start moving some of these mainframe systems to cloud-based systems first and foremost, and then after that, if they can start allowing their customer to transact and interact online in a digital environment, they're going to be, there is their BCP there. So transition to cloud, and then from a customer point of view, they should be able to do every single thing that they can, that they need to actually from behind one of these. Oh,
yes.
I know it's going into that background, but behind a mobile phone, that's where they should be able to do all of their insurance transactions from.
Yeah, and maybe some of the thinking has been historically it's a all or nothing type approach. So we have to completely replatform the entire business, and then it becomes an enormous cost to do that in one go, and it becomes a huge procurement exercise to sort of work out who the provider is going to be and whether it's going to work or not. But there are ways of sort of doing it in smaller chunks than that. So just picking off one function today. So it might be, companies maybe with their quote systems, for example, or with their pricing, the way they manage their pricing, just take that piece and look at that one. And then if that works, then you've then got a template that you can roll out to other parts of your platform.
Yeah. So that actually leads really nicely into the next question that I have for you, Matt, is like, how can an insurer innovate and digitize as quickly as possible, given some of the constraints that they may have?
So I if you bite off smaller pieces in one go, you're more in a position to be able to take a little bit of risk. There's always risk associated with these projects. So the more contained your project, the better able you are to take a little bit of risk and then move more quickly towards implementation, and then test and learn from that implementation all in one go, where the risks are so high that you almost cripple yourself with the sort of management of that risk.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. We've seen organizations that think, okay, cool, so we're going to digitize, so we're going to put in place this 7-year process or 7-year time frame. And so, well, let's scrap that and let's do 3-month build, measure, learn project. And then from that we can slowly pick off the next thing based on these learnings. And that's like a mind shift change, isn't it? It's going from that typical waterfall approach to an agile, hey, let's develop, deliver, and learn and as quickly as possible, to make sure that this business is set up to survive and then thrive.
Management overhead becomes a huge component of organization. So you're learning about how to most effectively manage those projects, about whether your perceived risks were real or not, and maybe there were risks that you hadn't foreseen that have emerged. And so there's a huge amount you can learn from a smaller project that you can then roll out to larger ones. And it means the cost can just be managed more effectively as well.
Just prodded a thought, Matt. Is there any particular suggestions that you would make to an insurer to speed up like a procurement process? Like let's assume that they have decided that they want to do this project and they want to do it with an insurtech. Is there any particular advice that you would give insurers who are looking to do this and want to make moves quickly?
Well, I mean, to me, procurement processes are mostly around risk management. That's the primary purpose of a sort of robust procurement process. We've all seen cases where that process wasn't run well, and poor decisions are made, and the outcomes are costly to the organisation. So the reason for having a procurement process, a decent procurement process, is pretty clear. In terms of how you then shorten that down, I think it again comes back to if you are you're tailoring the degree of risk management that you're incorporating to the size of the potential risk. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. So the procurement process that you might put in place for a complete platform retool with such high risk attached to it doesn't need to be the same one that you would apply to a smaller, sort of more bite-sized approach. And sometimes I think just having a bit more sort of focus up front about, well, what is the appropriate size of the procurement process here, can actually lead you down a path of saying, well, what if we take out some of these other risks? What if we just contain it right down? We can learn a bit more through the process itself, rather than having to be absolutely sure up front about every single potential risk here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because some of that can, but the wrong procurement process can leave, like, obviously risks exposed, but it can also delay a project even getting off the ground by a year if you want to, and then that's also problematic. So you need to find a middle ground, don't you? Of
exactly
can we go fast, but
yep.
also making sure we mitigate those really problematic risks.
And just being clear then about what risks you're exposing yourself to by doing that, and if those are manageable, then the benefits of going quickly are obviously clear, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Matt, just quickly, if you had one piece of advice that you could give to insurers that are looking to navigate their way through the new world, what would it be? Putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot. So I mean, and people who know me know this is always where I go to, and I've mentioned it a few times already here, but I'm just a big believer that risk is the thing that we're all really trying to manage. It's rarely what you are looking at when you're looking at a P&L or a return on investment type approach to things. So I think if you can really start to sort of change your thinking to being more of a what could go wrong, what are the costs of it going wrong, and how comfortable am I in accepting that risk and managing it from a risk perspective, that is a way to really sort of hone in on where are the most valuable decisions that you can make today. The ROI is important, and then the sort of projected ROI is important, but it's not the only thing. It doesn't really help you understand what are the range of consequences that we might see here. And if you do that, if you focus on that, I think you can really sort of start to see where the benefits are going to come, where the most opportunities are going to come.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that personally, but that sounds wicked. So for those insurers that are watching this, please take that on board. Yeah, because that sounds like that's coming from a man that has led a pricing team at AMP in Australia. So it's coming from a place of wisdom. Well, thank you for joining me today, Matt. It's been wicked talking to you. All the best,
welcome.
And we'll chat soon.
Yes, yeah. Good luck. Thank you.